I apologize. We got some technical difficulties, but we're trying to get it together. But you were saying,
Economics answers a lot of questions. It explains human behavior. And what has happened is we deal with economic issues through a criminal lens, or we deal with economic issues through a lens that isn't helpful to public health. So when I say I'm going to go and vote, what I'm saying is that my voice has a direct connection to my outcome. When I don't see a direct connection to the outcome for which I'm supposed to be speaking to, is where you now have this attitude of apathy. Well, why should I? Right? And having an economic agenda is paramount. I don't care about what happened to the people in the civil rights movement if I can't buy the things that I want to buy, if I can't get to where I need to get to, if I can't I have the education, but where are the opportunities for me to utilize my education? Yes. And one of the other things that has really removed some of the voter apathy, young people are starting to see people their age winning offices, yes, like the mayor in Stockton. Right. 26 years old. We're seeing that all over the country, and now it's no longer voting is something that you're told to do by your parents or by your grandparents. It's something that's being told for you to do, something that you're told to do by people who are looking for your vote.
Right. Right. So the aspect of that, do you feel it's made it to Shreveport?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've never seen this type of excitement from midterm elections ever. And I love politics. Just to be able to see rooms full of people who are engaged in the process and went a step further. We're not just talking about millennials who voted. We're talking about those that actually served on campaigns. We're talking about those that staffed these campaigns, that were out there knocking on doors, even if it wasn't for a candidate, also the issue campaigns. That's huge because, we don't have the luxury of a personality being attached to an issues campaign. You've got to break it down and make sure people are educated and they feel confident when they're going to vote. When people know what's going to be on the ballot and they know what they're going to vote for when they walk in, you have a higher turnout because people feel comfortable there. We've got to make voting more comfortable. I think we need to go further with voter education. We need to start telling people this is what happens when you walk into a poll. This is what it's going to look like. Walk them through the process before they have to get there. Take any of the anxiety away or any of the impediments that would keep them from wanting to exercise that right. And I think we're getting closer.
Right. And I think voter education has been important, as you said, because when you take the constitutional amendments, a constitutional amendment is very often obviously drawn up by the legislature, and the phraseology comes from some attorney who is working for the legislature, and sometimes is worded in such a way that is purposely confusing.
Absolutely.
To get the outcome that the author intended. Yeah.
Oh, we got to talk about amendment number one.
So take amendment number one as an example. Did you feel like people did not understand what they were being asked to vote for?
I don't think they did. I don't think they understood the history behind it. I think that we could have definitely done a better job statewide, letting people know. And by we, I mean just those of us that were in the know.
Right.
I think sometimes we get so hooked on one amendment because we're like, this will have the largest impact, that we don't stop and think that you have something like Amendment 2, which is, undeniably progressive for Louisiana. We're taking something from 1898 and we're saying we want to change it. It's finally in 2018.
Right.
But on the same ballot, you have amendment number 1, which is also undeniably regressive.
Right.
If you have people that have served their time and they paid their debt to society, why are we still criminalizing them by saying you're not allowed to get involved in the civic engagement process in the way you like if you choose to run for office?
Right.
What does that say to someone about our belief that prison is about rehabilitation?
Right.
If you believe that I'm rehabilitated and I've done what I'm supposed to do, why am I not allowed to seek office? And I get that it's controversial for some people, but once you're done, you're supposed to be done.
Right. Joy, what did you see on that?
So I had to read it a few times And then when I got a grasp, I said, okay, you know what? I don't think this is good. But I had to go over it. I'm not an attorney by trade, so I had to go over it a few times. And immediately, I began to think about people like former Governor Edwin Edwards, and so that's immediately what came to mind. But when I go to the country and hear from my 98-year-old great grandmother, she thinks that Edwin Edwards was the best governor ever.
Yep.
And so, again, I had to go over it, a few times to just grasp what it really meant. But there also is a 3-minute rule in the books. So I don't know if that was like really, really enforced in every parish, but there are some parishes that enforce that. Wow. So that means that you don't really have all the time in the world to sit there and go through these amendments and to go through these candidates like you really want to. You have to have almost your mind made up.
Right.
And so that is what that means.
So, I think, particularly on Amendment 1, you have a situation where a person's been sentenced, they serve their time completely, they're set what appears to be free, they decide to be engaged in political process, but they have to serve a second sentence.
Yes, exactly.
Right? And that essentially is what it is, a second sentence almost. And I know that that it's patently unfair.
Unconstitutional. Goes against what this country says it stands for. I've paid my debt, and now if anyone is going to be motivated to be part of the political process, it's someone who has been a victim of that process or processes. I found it deeply disturbing at how Amendment 1 was worded. I had to put a video retraction up after I reread it 3 more times to understand, oh my goodness, like, no, this is a good thing if we don't have a prohibition at all.
Right.
But the way that it was written was totally deceptive.
Right.
And I don't know if it was intentionally deceptive, but when you look at other things that are involved in this voting process, such as the Secretary of State website, navigating the voter portal is horrific.
Yeah.
And something as easy as making a website, why is it that difficult and challenging unless that is intentional?
Yeah.
And when I see a lot of things that could be seen as unintentional look like intentional, brings a lot of questions to my mind, and it's very disappointing. And when you dig a trap for someone, you end up falling into it.
And I think it's so true about a lot of things, that how we just kind of back into them. When we talk about the jury, unanimous jury, it's interesting that Oregon was the other state that was seeming to have these archaic kind of rules. Now they stand alone. But the interesting flip side of that for the state of Oregon is they are, I don't want to say they're the only, but they're one of the states I know of, the only one I can think of, where when you turn 18, you are registered to vote because you're 18. And you have to disqualify yourself, in other words, not to vote, but everybody's automatically registered when they reach a certain age. And that, to me, seems wildly progressive. But I said to somebody, you got to think about when that came to be. No doubt when it came to be, it's probably a more homogenous state. And they were doing it to make it easy. So just like you dig a hole for yourself, sometimes you give other folks benefits that you never intended for them to have as well. But let's talk, if we can, about local Shreveport, our local races. Clearly, the top race here was the mayor's race, right? And tell me just your opinion, thoughts of however you best can talk about it, whether you talk about the process, individuals, whatever. What was your takeaway from Tuesday? Results.
Okay, now ladies first. Well, I don't have anything stopping me from saying that I'm undeniably an Adrian Perkins supporter, but not just to talk about him as a candidate, but just what it was like to have someone who did come back to the city and say, the city is worth it, the people here are worth it, and people really responded to that. Especially people in our age group. And again, it was just so much excitement. But I think that excitement spilled over into many races, regardless of who the the candidate was, I saw an unprecedented number of people that I know talking about the local mayoral race. It wasn't difficult to insert my own things about like the amendment and whatnot because people were already talking. And I think that shows, especially with us having a younger voter turnout, that social media is here to stay. And it's a quick way for us to be able to organize one another and to educate one another. Something going viral can have much more of an impact than just one day or one forum, which are necessary. The forums are absolutely necessary for people to be able to come to. But there are so many of us that work and work hours that forums don't necessarily take into account, and have jobs, have children. And so being able to read up about your candidate on social media or going to their website is something that, I mean, we took full advantage of. And so I think that really helped with getting people excited because they finally knew what there was out there to be excited about.
Right. So you say this, there's so much that happened because you had so many candidates to choose from in the mayor's race, but there was also, I saw sort of a youth movement in the down ballot races as well, particularly city council. I tell you, I was doing analysis for one of the local news stations, and what caught my attention was the notion that there was a young man who was, I want to say 19, maybe 20, 19 or 20 years old, who was in District E, who was winning. And not just competitive
Quentin.
to some extent, but Quentin, ended up when 18 of the 22 boxes were in, he was still in the lead.
Quentin is so dope.
And here's what the reason I bring that up is because even though he's young, and you talked about the evolution of how politics changes, one of the things that Quentin also helped me to realize is that politics that is local is still retail. Still retail politics. Quentin he had homemade signs. He was knocking on doors. He was doing those kind of things. And it's those kind of things that still work. While social media, I had some people who were older talk to me and say to me, we didn't get any ballots in the mail. And I said, well, I'm not sure that day is gone, but they were looking for ballots in the mail.
Right.
And as a result, there's a young lady, a sister, who is in the runoff for Secretary of State.
Yes,
because she was the first Democrat on the list. And people said, I don't know who all these people are. And they went back to the first day, and she made the runoffs.
Yes, she
because
did.
People just went in, they were uninformed about who these folks were. And so even though there's all of the social media, there's still room for television. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think politics, while it changes and evolves, it kind of stays the same, that you still got to shake hands, knock doors. When you think about the process, how much do you think social media played in getting young people out, and then it's still good to do mail-outs?
There's a place for both. I don't want to take over the conversation, but I think that you have to have a multi-level strategy. You can't just depend on the data if you don't know how to apply it.
Right.
You can have all of the targeting with Facebook and whatnot, but if you're not going out there and making a connection with the actual voters, and you're not letting them see, I'm a real person, I'm not just behind a screen, and letting them see you face to face, shaking their hand, there's nothing that replaces that human connection. So I think there's a place for both. They talk about it being the old school way with the mail out ballots. I need something to hold when I go into the voting booth. Maybe my phone won't be working that day. There's a place for both, and I think that the best candidates know that they need to marry the two and make sure that you're reaching people the old school way, or having the paper ballots, but also giving a digital platform too for everything that you believe in.
Did you see a lot of campaigns that you may have been close to that use multiple platforms to reach people?
Multiple platforms is definitely the way. You cannot alleviate any part of the process, whether it's the knocking on doors, whether it's the phone banking, whether it's the robocalling, whether it's the bot media, whether it's the free media. You can never, ever, ever eliminate one piece because you never know what voter is engaged to that certain piece. Just like how you are a pastor, you cannot decide, oh, well, church, we're just going to be on Facebook Live this Sunday, and you all can just pay your tithes online, right? I mean, I don't know that. I don't know that would go over well with a lot of the members, who expect to see their pastor
Right.
face to face. And so even just with voters, they want to see candidates face to face. You know, you can send a representative, he's fine, but people want to know that I can shake Pastor Jackson's hands at the end of the day. Candice, can you come out here for a unanimous jury? If not, you know, we really want you, you know, and so we can alter the time. If you can't come at 6, we'll make it 6:30. So, you know, I mean, again, it goes back to your point that you asked. Multi platforms are definitely the way, and then the candidates have to just make sure that they're involved in every step of the multi platform.
Tuesday night when the election was over, what was your thoughts? Locally, what were your thoughts?
I'm gonna tap in what.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna add on to that, and I'm gonna deal with your question. Answer your question. Engagement. Well, that's what we're talking about. Is how you engage. One of the things that I noticed in the race was the difference in social media strategies. One was very engaging in terms of, hey, I've seen what you said, I saw what comment you put on there, and I responded, or just didn't necessarily respond, but liked it. So at least I know, as somebody who's paying attention to your campaign,
Right.
You saw what I said, okay.
Right.
In other campaigns, that wasn't the case. So seeing how that can actually affect voter behavior is extremely important. After the race, November 6th, I think there were a lot of surprised people. One of the things that was concerning was a lot of the noise around the campaigns that was kind of disheartening for me, especially as a black man and a young black man. You know, there are always things trying to tear down figures in our community, especially new figures in our community, especially even established figures in our community. We don't operate as a single community or as a single interest group, right? We can disagree on candidate, but what are our real interests? What are the real agenda that we're pushing? And collaboration is the gift, not competition.
Right.
Unfortunately, our current political system puts us in competition. But the fact is that after the competition is over,
Right.
there's opportunities for collaboration, and collaboration truly is the gift.
And what happens is, I find in this community, what happens is it becomes almost impossible to coalesce, because rather than just being political, it got personal. And whenever it gets personal, it's more difficult to coalesce than if you had stayed above the fray. You know, pardon my grammar, but be for who you for. And you don't have to be against anybody else. And I really appreciate that comment, because I think that is absolutely correct, that we find ourselves, what I said, when I see elders in the village who are willing to condescend and to take down younger people, that's unacceptable to me. I certainly commend the mayor who ran in this race, who is a person who is an elder in our community, but who never was during the election process condescending to people. There were folks on the outside who were condescending and who happened to be African American. And I didn't waste any time here in the pulpit on Sunday morning saying to the people who felt bold enough to do that, that you're in violation of the village values, that we don't do that to each other. And what has happened, there should be something to pay for being in violation of the village's values. I mean, it sets such a bad tone. I am where I am today because there are older people who put their arms around me, win, lose, or draw, good or bad, who just kept their arms around me. No Murphy Hunt, no Edward Jones, no Harry Blake, no Theron Jackson. And it's just how it is. And we all need it. And rather than having mentors, we have people who end up being folks who seek to denigrate, who seek to just really castigate young people. And I really think that's troubling to me. I don't know how y'all felt about that, but I thought that was in poor taste for people who were senior to do those kind of things.
56%. That's how much make up the city. Are the majority.
6%. Yeah.
The majority.
Right,
and we don't have to act like the minority.
Right.
We are not. And this is a place where we can actually make things happen. And when you make things happen for those who are at the bottom first, everybody rises.
Right.
When you tear down pillars, established pillars, and potential pillars in your community, you do not do anything for you, especially when wealth is built on your backs.
Exactly.
I was disappointed.
Yeah.
I didn't really say a whole lot, on my social media. I just said, and I would read through the comments, and I'm like, wow, this is really your character,
Right.
And so this election, if it didn't do anything else, it taught me a lot about people's character. But I'm grateful for elders like yourself. You're not afraid to call a spade a spade. Pastor Jackson has never been afraid, and so we just need to keep good people like you engaged on social media with what we're doing, as young people, because at the end of the day, when everything is all said and done, we are still pressing the button that says Black, African American, minority.
And I'll just tell you this: I think when you have the physical majority, but you still perform like a mental minority, then you create an environment for apartheid. And that's what ends up happening. You create the environment for apartheid because you have a physical majority who act like mental minorities. And when you've been minority so long, when you call yourself minority, keep acting minority, then guess what? It is to the benefit of the true minority to allow you to act that way so that they can usurp the majority position. And so I hope that, because all politics is local, that all politics doesn't necessarily have to be racial, but there should be some community values. And I pray that even in this runoff, we have until December 8th, and we'll vote again, and early voting obviously starts before then. But it is my hope that everybody is represented, that our senior, our elder people in our communities, whether they're elder statesmen, just elder participants, will seek to continue to encourage younger people to get involved and come out, and that young people will have a deference that is unshakable for knowing that we stand on the shoulders of people who are giants who took less and did more with it very often than we do. So my prayer is, as we wrap this up, if you were giving advice to young and old people in this community as we move toward the runoffs with two African Americans, our current mayor who is female African American, our the challenger who finished first in the election who was a young African American male. What is the advice we give to them? And if we had to give a piece of advice, I'm sorry, not to them, perhaps to them as well, but to our community, how do we frame the thought process for those who are making a decision to go toward December the 8th? Each person.
Okay.
I know you're shy.
Right. Just that we need you all to show up again, regardless of who your candidate is. There are so many other important issues on the ballot. You mentioned Secretary of State. If there are things that you didn't like about the website or the voting process, people talked about not having stickers. That everything is political. That is decided. Everybody wanted the sticker. That process that goes into the budget when you're Secretary of State. That's someone who's now going to be in the runoff. And what you want to remember is when December 8th comes and the candidates are confirmed as being elected, being the mayor or whatever office, we have to stop building the walls, and we need to understand that it is perfectly okay to just have a longer table. And everybody is invited to the table. I hear people say that democracy is not a spectator sport and you have to get involved. That doesn't have to stop when you leave the voting booth. Keep your candidates accountable, keep your elected officials accountable, and just remember that this is going to happen again in 2019. It doesn't stop just because the person you wanted to won. You have to stay involved.
Sure thing. So I would say that stay the course. Nothing ever comes easy. A lot of times the numbers dip, and you just don't have the same turnout as far as a runoff is concerned. But December the 8th should matter. Really, every election should matter, whether it's a special election, whether it's a runoff. And so with nothing coming easy, mail back your ballot if you have to. Do exactly what you have to go that extra mile because, for example, December the 8th is a Saturday. And that date is like Christmas in the sky. So just in Shreveport, we have a multiplicity of things that will be going on. People will be prepared preparing for the holiday season, and so you have a lot of things going through your mind, but your vote has to be the priority.
Yes.
And again, nothing comes easy. Mail back your ballot. You have to early vote, but make sure that your voice is heard on December the 8th and every election there on out.
Yeah. Your advice?
Of the people, by the people, for the people. This is your government. Yours. Make it work for you. If it's not working for you and it's working for somebody else, then you need to put more work in to make it work for you. And this is that work that needs to be done. Going out, yes, we all like to just one and done, but sometimes you have to go back that second time and make it happen and knock it out. And that's what we have to do. We have to realize the importance of what we're doing. The only rights you have are the ones you exercise.
Well, I'll tell you this, and I want to first say thank you all for everything you've added to this conversation. I really appreciate it. You got to come back. It's been enlightening. I enjoyed the level of the conversation. The discourse is an elevated discourse. But I will say this to you, that Tuesday night when we finished the election, this is what I knew for sure. I knew whoever the next mayor was going to be, we were going to have a person there who was going to be ready. I say that because you don't get to be an African American female who's held an executive position without having come through a lot. You certainly don't get to be a young African American man, the usual suspect, get to that level, have people's confidence without having gone through a lot. That when this election is over, we will have had someone who's been both tested and tried and who has gotten there by the grace of God and through a lot of tenacity and hard work, whether it be Mayor Tyler or Adrian Perkins. We should be proud that we have somebody who has come through to be where they are. Whether you're a young African American male, I hope that's a word of hope for the sisters on whose backs we've come through for so long, that she has been a symbol of that as well. That there ought not be losers in this race. That 12/9 ought to be a special day in Shreveport. That December 9th ought to be such a special day that it's Amnesty Day. That it is Forgiveness Day. That everybody comes into a big room and decides it's over. And now that it's over, you don't ask for forgiveness. It's assumed for everybody in the room. Let's go forward together and make this city a better city. Don't know that will happen. That's my prayer and hope and dream. But I do think if we're going to be a better city, it's going to take all hands on deck. And we can't lose in this situation. We do have candidates who I think will serve us well. And I look forward to a vigorous race, a vigorous campaign. But I'm also looking forward to the end of the campaign when we can begin a new day with a mayor who's either reelected or elected for the first time for one city. And I hope that's the way we can go forward. I want to personally thank the other folks who ran in this race as well, in the mayor's race. I can't call all the names, but all of them, I want to thank them for being a part of the process. I know what it's like to finish third and not have a runoff 20 years ago, but I want you to know that it takes a lot for folks to offer themselves. So thank you to those folks in council races, people who ran for school board. Unfortunately, around here, we minimize races like school board when they may be the most important positions in the entire parish because you're shaping futures like nobody else. But to those folks who were successful, those folks who ran, you were successful because you tried. And I want to encourage folks to continue to get involved in the process. And thank you all so much for being here. And keep doing what you're doing and know that the best is yet to come. Thank y'all for tuning in. I appreciate y'all being in the spotlight again tonight. If you got comments, leave them down in the comments section. Thank you so much, and God bless you.